Hello, today we're going to be talking about imperialism. It's a funny word. It's basically a different version of the word empire. It's all about building the empire. And at this point, we're talking about, I know we in the last video we were talking about a little bit up into the early 1900s. Now we're kind of like rewinding a bit to look at stuff that was also happening in the 1800s. We can't necessarily teach history in a completely linear fashion because there are different things going on at the same time. And in order to hammer down on the concepts, we follow each concept individually through time. With imperialism, it's basically empires seeking to gain more territory. Why more territory? Why do you want more land? Would you want to get a bunch of desert land that there's nothing in there and nothing can grow? It's not really advantageous to have desert territory. But if you have farmland that you're able to control, or you're able to control waterways where you're able to transport things, or even places where there's lots of abundant fish, that's also very advantageous. So the true reason for expanding your empire is to have access to more resources. And you might ask, well, doesn't the country have enough to support itself? Why would it need more resources? Well, funny you should mention that. If we look back at industrialization, where you have, just a little recap. Industrialization. With industrialization, you're turning raw goods you can either turn into a manufactured good or just use as a raw good. For those of you who are very visual learners, an example would be tomato, wheat, milk. We could turn that milk into cheese, we could turn the wheat into bread, we could turn the tomato into tomato paste, and we would get maybe a manufactured good. An example would be like a frozen pizza. Or maybe it could be just cotton and it becomes clothes. That's another example. So you need to keep the same amount of raw goods because people still need access to the raw goods, especially for people who like to do DIY, means do-it-yourself little projects. You need the manufactured goods, especially because you have a lot of immigration going on. You're starting to see why there's certain topics have to be taught first before others, right? With more people, you need more things. It's like a family with more children. They need more food at home. So you need to have access to more resources. So there's two ways you can increase your resources. Make more resources on the territory you have, or conquer someone else, take it from someone else. You could also trade, but if you own it, it's a lot easier. An example is if you own your own lawnmower, it's a lot easier to mow your lawn versus having to borrow one or rent one out every single time. So with imperialism, it was necessary, or it was spurred on by industrialization. Industrialization and immigration Oh my goodness. So industrialization, immigration. Created the need I guess this pen is on its last foot. Created the need for more resources. Okay, time for this pen to go out of here. Created the need for more resources, which some countries addressed by taking over new territories. And to this day, we still the United States still owns different territories, Puerto Rico, Guam, and some other islands as well. Now, imperialism, quote unquote, isn't truly necessary. We've seen how in this day and age it's a lot harder to conquer another nation without being met by a backlash of many other nations, as we have seen with World War I and World War II and other proxy wars, such as the Vietnam War. So this imperialism concept, it's been around for like a long, long time. The 13 colonies, they were a form of imperialism afterwards. At first it was just for religious freedom, but then it's like the British Empire was able to, Great Britain was able to increase its resources by accumulating more territory. Portugal, France, the Netherlands, other countries were doing the same thing. And imperialism is the stronger nation controls a weaker territory. Oh, that's my dog. So a stronger nation exercises economic, so the money, military, and political control. Over a weaker territory. So you may kind of think of this as bullying. The bigger, stronger bully is gonna take lunch money from the smaller, weaker kid. It's usually not the other way around. You're not gonna have a very small young child extorting someone else bigger, older than them for resources. So actually, let's go more into, so we know what imperialism was caused by. It was industrialization, immigration, and other countries thought it was just easier to take over more territories instead of like making themselves more efficient. They thought they were already making themselves efficient enough by doing industrialization. Let's look on these effects of like exercising different control on other territories. So there's also like, these are fuel to the fire. these are factors encouraging, encouraging imperialism. Alright, so we have economic. It's all about that money, money, money. Military. I mean, you can't just walk into another country and say like, yo, give me all your resources, you're now my country. No, you need a military to exercise it. You gotta flex. Next, you have political factors. Next, you have religious. So political does sometimes go into like people's beliefs, but then religious hits a little bit closer to home. And then we have something else that also deals with beliefs, is also culture. So even though some people have similar political values, they might have a similar religion, but their culture is very different. For example, Eastern cultures tend to be very much of like, you have to be on time. If you're like a minute or two late, it's very rude. But then here with Hispanic culture, when you say a party is at 6 p.m., you know it's not going to start till like 8:30 at night. For real. So with economic, you want more money. You want either natural resources or access to new markets. You're like, access to new markets, what does that even mean? Okay, so let's say that a certain crop grows in one area that doesn't really grow in your original country at all. And now you have something else that you can trade. If it's some like if you have a lot of sheep that will grow in that other territory that you're dominating, you can now shave the wool off the sheep, and now you have new trade. You can now trade wool. By diversifying, by having different markets that you can that a nation can trade in, they make them so stronger, because if let's say their wool industry goes down, they still have like maybe they have the fish industry, maybe they have the manufacturing industry to depend on, so you're more resilient. Another way to think about it is like you have different sources of income, like on an individual level. Like let's say I'm teaching, and maybe I'm doing like freelancing, and maybe I'm doing like a side gig, like dog sitting. Well, let's say all of a sudden I lose one of those jobs, I still have a little bit of money coming in. That way I'm not completely broke. Same thing with the country. Next would be military reasons. So if you have, this is especially true in earlier times, because if you need to constantly protect your own country from being invaded, so maybe there's a country in a spot that's like, oh, if you were invaded from that area, then it would be very easy to take over your country. In that case, you'd want to control that territory first, that way you can already start defending yourself. So maybe you'd want to take control of a certain area, either as a refueling, like an extra base, like a lookout, to protect the heartland. The heartland is like the heart, like the center of the country, like the main region. So like let's say we're having like bombs flying, or like different missiles like flying, let's say to like Washington DC, something that will help detect it, like aside from satellite technology, we would have different states from all around kind of protecting, and they'd be able to like know before it reached like the middle of the country. So all of this is a term called a buffer zone. You won't necessarily see this term in the high set, but this is a term that is used in the end of course exam for geography and other social studies. It's the new tax or TOS version. Political. What is a political reason? Some countries, this is very true with if it's democracy or if it's a form of like fascism. All these are different like political institution types. You want other countries to have similar political structures as yours. That way, if you ever get into a fight, they'll be your friends. It's for example, especially how there's a lot of heated things going on where people are really identifying themselves as either Democrat or Republican, and there's a lot of separation. People will tend to be more friendly with people who are on the same political party versus if they know that they're from different political parties, they might lead into conflict, or they'll do things to like that are not advantageous to the other party. So you want to spread, you want to make everyone like you, but truly we know that actually causes a lot of problems. I mean, if there was like 30 other people just like you, that would be pretty boring, wouldn't it? So you just want to spread your ideology. Religious, same thing. A lot of wars have been fought over religion. So again, spread your ideology. A lot of religions also like mandate spreading the religion either through like different ways of ministering, or in some of them they even require people to breed or have a lot of children in order to like gain more people into the religion. And then culture, like I said, it's very similar to religious, but culture depends on the region. For example, the culture of northern Mexico, los norteños, versus like people from DF, Distrito Federal of Mexico, very different. Same thing if you go to people from the panhandle of Texas versus people who are in South Texas. Our views on Tex-Mex are going to be drastically different. And if you go even northern, even more north into the United States, people's idea of Tex-Mex food would be Taco Bell instead of some other delicious food. So another reason for cultural factors encouraging was this one is more of a lack of respect. So when different territories try to conquer another area, they end up just trying to like change everything to be the same, because when there's something that's different from yourself, you may not understand the importance. Some cultures are very keen on having like kosher practices, and if you are disrespectful or just like being completely ignorant, you might cause the people to like turn against you. So what some of these territories might do is that they'll just go ahead and enforce and try to get rid of that culture through time. In fact, in the Spanish tried to do this, which was literally called whitewashing. You normally hear that term like in like media, where they try to turn certain actors to be more of a clearer skin. But with when Spain conquered like Mexico and Central America, they were trying to cleanse the native people and like also Africans that were brought upon slave ships to Mexico and those other areas, and clean out through the races by breeding those people with more Spanish people. So there was an entire caste system. By caste system, it's basically just a hierarchy. The darker skinned you were, the lower you were here. If you're completely Spanish or European, you were at the top of the food chain. And then depending on how much Spanish or European, or you could say white blood, you had, you were like more well off. So that was a lack of respect for the different cultures. So let's talk specifically about the United States. For those of you who are originally from Texas and maybe had 7th grade Texas history, the United States did kind of engage in this. If you all remember, Texas was, from our lessons, that Texas was its own nation. So U.S., United States, Imperialism. So different countries have just been doing this for centuries. The United States is like, well, you know what? We're industrializing. We got a lot of immigration. We've kind of like maxed out on our East Coast to West Coast. Like we've already been from like this side of the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific where California is. Like we need more land, and like there's Canada above us, there's Mexico beneath us. Like we need to find some land quick. We need some more resources. So in 1898, the United States entered the Spanish-American War, or it became the Spanish-American War. So the reason they came into the war, and yes, they're gonna sound like total hypocrites, is here's the deal. Spain owned Cuba and mistreated Cuba. Alright, this is the first part. Went on to the second thing. U.S. was offended. Alright. So then the Spanish-American War happens. The United States wins the war. And then number 5. Okay, so the whole reason the United States went into a war that was none of their business, truly, was because they were offended on how Spain was treating their own territory. And the United States won. You would think that the United States did not agree with other countries owning different countries, you know. In fact, that's the whole thing about the United States. They were a colony, and they were being mistreated by Great Britain. And nope, the United States did not free Cuba. They just said, you know what, Cuba, we own you now. So United States owns Cuba instead of setting it free. And knowing this, you can kind of understand some of the resentment between Cuban military leaders and political leaders with the United States, because it really, the United States was truly was just, the actions do make it into a hypocrite. So owns Cuba And they also gain other, and US gains Spain's colonies, which are also include Puerto Rico, and it also includes the Philippines, and also Guam. So Puerto Rico, it's around the same area as Cuba. The Philippines is in Asia. Guam is like in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But if you're surprised that Spain owned the Philippines, you actually, if you kind of remember that one of Spain's king was King Philip, he named that colony after himself, the Philippines, because he really loved the Philippines. I mean, that's where avocados come from. How do you think Mexican cuisine uses like guacamole and avocado for everything? It came from the Philippines, and they were able to trade it with Mexico because they were all owned by Spain. So trade between these different areas were very common. So now the United States gains this. Wow. Isn't that surprising? So then the United States, after this, goes into World War I. That's going to be a different video. So let me know what you think about the United States taking advantage of this situation. And you will see repeated throughout history where one country tries to be like the savior or a friend, and they'll just try to see what they can gain from it. The same thing happened with France. They were in an issue with Great Britain, and they wanted to like help the United States during the American Revolution. That way the United States and France would be on good terms. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. That is something that is kind of highlighted throughout the rest of history. Alright, so the next video will be World War I.